Hello, everyone. I'm Holly Schroeder, and welcome to SCV Means Business, the podcast where we meet great leaders making a difference in their community. It's a podcast of the Santa Clarita Valley Economic Development Corporation. And I'm pleased today to be here with Tyrone Rosales from Amicis Research Center, a new addition, at least for your corporate headquarters, to the Santa Clarita Valley. We're certainly pleased to welcome your headquarters to the Santa Clarita Valley here. So, Tyrone, why don't you tell us a little bit about what Amicis does?
So Amicis Research Center is an independent clinical research company. We were established and founded 2017, and we specialize in one sentence. I'll try to do this as best as possible. In one sentence, we try to acquire data through the conduction of clinical trials in which the pharmaceutical companies use it to get it approved by the FDA. The best example I can give you, Holly, is think of COVID. Remember when COVID stormed in on us and everyone was kind of encapsulated in their households? There were no drugs vaccines that can help us. So here in the United States, the FDA requires clinical studies to go through, clinical studies and get so that they can evaluate the safety and efficacy profile of these medications or vaccines. So that is where Amicis comes into place. We assist the pharmaceutical companies and try to acquire data that they will send off to the FDA for them to review if it's safe and effective. Okay,
great. So let's unpack that a little bit because it's a pretty interesting area of activity, right? And
yes.
These are new drugs, untested. So are these drugs do you do this for any type of pharmaceutical? You're trying to treat different diseases and illnesses. So what's your scope of type of research that you guys work on?
Great question. We are actually not relegated or restricted from any organ system. So you name it, any disease, any disorder, we're practically involved in it, and we're associated and highly acquainted with many pharmaceutical companies, whether they're the top 5 that you can easily Google or they're the startup biotech companies that are trying to make their mark in the pharmaceutical industry. So every organ system, every disease, disorder, we try to tackle them all.
Wow. Okay. So that's a wide scope. So let's start from the doctor side or the physics side. So how do doctors, get involved? How do you know that this is being done under the supervision of a medical professional? When somebody has an illness and you're trying something new, right? You're trying something that's unknown. So what is that like? How does it get started?
Yeah, great. Another great question. So here in the United States, we have this governing body called FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. And one of the requirements is you need to have, and I'm not sure if I can recite this exact, but as long as they're competent and credentialed, so it doesn't necessarily have to be an MD or a DO, which is another form of a practicing physician. As long as they're a specialist and have the proper credentials and background, but more importantly, the experience, they can oversee the clinical trial. But for the sake of our discussion and questions, let's kind of pivot off that and focus on medical doctors. So these medical doctors would then need to contract with the FDA and announce their responsibilities and say, we will oversee the conduction of this clinical study from an ethical, moral, and obviously medical standpoint. So that is one of the things that the community needs to understand, that there are many doctors and physicians that are overseeing every progress of these clinical trials. It's not like, you have personnel who are not qualified and don't have the competence level to really walk them through the progression of this clinical study.
And these are practicing doctors, right? Yeah. So these aren't just like doctors in an academic setting or a research setting. They're practicing doctors, or is it both? Or how does
Yeah.
what's their credential that way?
So you'll have both, but for the majority of our projects, they are run by medical doctors, MDs, who also might even have a PhDs as well. So because we provide interventional treatment, which are obviously drugs that are taken orally, intravenously, and different types of administration methods, it is highly requested that a medical degree holder is overseeing the project. But you will have PhD holders as well that can supplement the overseeing of the clinical trial.
Okay. So now let's go to the other side of the coin. I'm the patient, right? So I've got some affliction, some disease, some ailment, illness, and I'm like, there's got to be something better, right?
Yeah.
Or I'm thinking that. So what's that side of the pathway look like?
So if you were a patient trying to seek alternative treatment or medication for your illness,
Yeah.
So first and foremost, we are very, very receptive and accommodating to patients who are proactively seeking alternative medication, because you and I know this. It's 2023. A lot of these medications, actually, let me take it a step back. Before they were called Tylenol or these famous drugs that people take, they were once considered just a molecule or a compound. They didn't even have a name that we're so associated and affiliated with, right? So we appreciate those that really do want to seek and involve themselves with alternative treatment, because things have changed. Anatomically, we still have eyes, we still have organ systems, but physiologically, and the environment that we live in, whether it's diet or just the environment alone, has caused some drugs to maybe not be as safe and effective as they once were. So we always advocate and accommodate those that are trying to get themselves involved. So from a patient standpoint, if they do have a desire to seek alternative treatment, the very first step is to consult with their physician, their primary care physician, and say, hey, listen, I've been taking this medication, this let's just use hypertensive medications. I've been taking it, but my blood pressure is still through the roof, or my diabetes, my A1C levels are still through the roof. Is there any way we can try something new? And through the course of these workups, a practicing physician hopefully should identify, what, this is not working for you. And then hopefully that's where we kind of jump in and insert ourselves and say, we have these opportunities that you can get involved in.
So how do you test then that the drug is working? I mean, is it like some people get the drug, some people don't get the drug, like the control group? And if so, what does that mean? I mean, is that how that works? Maybe I'll stop there.
Yeah. So there are different types of clinical trials that are conducted. The one that you were alluding to, there's a term for it. It's called the placebo. A placebo is a drug, like let's just call it a sugar pill, where it might look identical to the tablet that's active, right? It might even look, feel, everything identical to the active tablet, but it really doesn't cause a response, from your body. So because it's just a sugar or water pill. So, so not all clinical studies have this comparator of placebo with active. Some of them have, both active, comparing things that are already approved. So, for example, if we're again, these are just arbitrary or hypothetical scenarios. If you and I are trying to find out if product X is just as safe and effective as Tylenol, they'll run a clinical study in parallel and see, which one is much more effective, and they'll submit it to the FDA, and they'll determine if it's good enough for the public to use.
That makes sense, because if you're on a medication for a illness, you can't just go off that safely, right? To try something new and get a placebo and then you got nothing, right? That would be
right.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, that is actually, I'd like to explore that a little bit further. The placebo aspect of clinical trials is one of the hotter topics that are talked about, Holly. A lot of our physicians say, well, that's kind of unethical for us to remove them from a drug, and next thing you know, they're untreated, right?
Right.
And so that is where the tricky and the more complex scenarios come into place. And, I'll just say it's tougher for us because as we need the patients to acquire the data. The data lies within the patient's participation. And so it's very important the physician hand selects and invites the patients that can um, participate in the clinical study without falling deeper into their sickness.
Right.
So it's one of those challenges.
Yeah. Yeah. So how long, I mean, what's the typical process? I'm sure it varies, but I mean, how long is somebody in a trial? How long do trials last? And what, how does they report? How do they do reporting? I mean, just kind of talk now that the trial's set up, where does it go from there?
Yeah. So clinical trials vary. There's clinical trials that last, some weeks, months, and then several years. And that is, yeah, so several years. And as they get deeper into the phases of clinical trials, so there are four phases: phase one, two, three, and four. And as you ascend into the deeper phases, it requires much more time because now the FDA is requiring for much more strict parameters, highly specified details to the protocols, to further prove that this compound, product X, really does do this for Holly, Tyrone, Mark, Bobby, and so on and so forth. So the length of time for clinical trials does vary.
Gosh, it's such a really interesting thing. So how do you find people? I mean, how do you enroll people? Tell me a little bit about the role that Amicis plays in this whole process that we've been talking about.
So the format is somewhat of the more popular format would be like a triangulated collaboration. Yeah, it pretty much we get the patients from the physicians. Okay, so we our approach is we contact physicians that have a desire to advocate for clinical research, and if they are willing to support our philosophies and desires to provide alternative medications, they will then invite their patients and say, hey, we have these indications and therapeutic areas that we're trying to provide and get more data for. Would you be interested? So it's through the collaboration with the physicians that allow us to accumulate the patient pool of clinical research participants.
And you probably got to have a far reach in order to get enough people to participate. I mean, obviously, if you're looking at something that everybody in the population would have, would want, like a Tylenol, then that's probably easier than something with a very specialized or small population of illness.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So then tell me a little bit about Amicis. Obviously, you just moved your headquarters here, but you have locations for your research activities. I don't know if what do you call them, research centers or
Centers,
labs? Tell me about those, where they are, and who are the type of people that work in those? What type of backgrounds do they have?
yeah. So we have approximately, I believe, and the reason why I lose count on this is because our business development team is working, excuse me, diligently in trying to get our 10th. I think we're in 8 or 9 centers now, and they are spanned throughout California. The most distal would be Sacramento region. It's a place called Vacaville. We do have one here in Valencia, conveniently on Valencia Boulevard, but a little less than a handful in the northern San Fernando Valley area. And typically, the personnel that mans those research centers are research coordinators, nurses, and obviously doctors, in which they all do the same thing. They have the same functions. We conduct specific clinical trials, and then we invite patients who would be eligible for these trials, and the coordinators and doctors will work in tandem to determine if there'd be a good candidate to receive the alternative treatment.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So So if somebody wanted to like support clinical research and get into this field, are they, what kind of background? I mean, what kind of education are they getting? Do you need to be a nurse or a doctor, or is there other parts of the of background training that people would want? Do they have to have a science background? Tell me about what kind of education they have typically.
So in particular, I think that's one of the things that makes Amicis unique. We really don't. We're less conservative in terms of allowing participants, or I mean, I'm sorry, not participants, but candidates who want to enter into clinical research. You don't necessarily need to have an MD or nursing degree. Obviously, for those are are reserved for specific assessments or procedures. Here in the United States, you need to be a nurse to do certain things, a physician to do certain things. But what makes Amicis Research Center unique is we allow candidates or applicants who are interested in getting into clinical research and enter through a pathway, whether that's through our research academy. So this research academy is where we accept applicants who want to get involved in the medical field without any medical training or nursing or college degrees or anything of that nature. And we slowly bring them in, and we bring them in as research assistants and teach them the foundation and the whole objective of clinical research. Because in the clinical research industry, or specifically our company, there are so many job opportunities that you can offer. You can be a lab technician, you can be a patient scheduler, a recruiter. So that's what we found has made us unique and has been sprouted us great success. Absolutely.
So with your research center, somebody could come in and really not have much background and want to figure out what part of the clinical research industry they want to be in, and then start their further education from there.
Yeah,
Career
yeah.
training.
Yes, absolutely. One of the more common things, Holly, and I'm extremely happy and proud to say this, is we've had many employees, cross over into the clinical, regulatory, administrative, because once they finally get, they conceptualize, they understand what the bigger picture is. You know, they love the idea that they can address this curiosity or this interest that they had when they were in middle school or high school, but they never really got the opportunity. So that's one of the things that, at least for now, I am extremely interested as a leader of the company, interested in, because that's how I became who I am today, with a simple opportunity. And I do believe people are able to sit in their position, sit in the chairs that they have, because someone gave them an opportunity. So whether that's through the traditional route of scholastics and academics, great. But, I never once fathomed, or dreamt of being a CEO of a research company, of quickly of a fast growing research company, until someone gave me the opportunity and said, do you want to see what it looks like behind the covers, or behind this wall, behind this door? And through my curiosity, I said yes. And so my path to medical school was, postponed, and then eventually abandoned or aborted. And now I'm deep into this as a career. And so I try to carry that, that philosophy with all my employees, because you give them an opportunity to conceptualize this, and they align their interest and their motivation, great things will happen.
I think when people think about the healthcare field, they probably, they're going to first think of being a doctor or being a nurse, right?
Yeah.
But there's so much more involved that, until you really step back and think about it and observe, you may not know what really, what excites you, you personally, or what people might be most interested in. So that's very great workforce development program and career opportunity program we have. That's really cool.
Yeah, and it's funny how you say that, because I always, if you talk to me, or anywhere at a restaurant, grabbing a cocktail or anything, and they ask me, about clinical research, that's one of the topics I bring up, is it's not one of the more popular or common, pathways into the medical field. You get the, X-ray techs, nurses, doctors, but no one really talks about clinical research, and I think it's really unfortunate, because uh, I I didn't know this world existed until
Yeah.
someone said, take a look at this. And so I just think, in order for me to do my part in giving back, I really do need to share as much information about clinical research, and whether, again, that's from a professional standpoint or through the patients or the doctors. I just want to provide what's really out there. People deserve it. It's
Yeah.
2023. They need to learn more about this industry.
Very cool. Very cool. So can you say a little bit about the types of research you're doing right now? Are there particular illnesses or, projects you're working on that, where's the biggest area of study that you guys are focused on,
Yeah.
if you can maybe say, or most exciting, or something like that?
The most exciting, for that question, I can talk about all day, but for the sake of brevity, I'll touch on this. The most exciting for me is when we get to take on projects, rare disease projects. The projects where it's the last draw. These patients have contacted a specialist, a primary care physician, and nothing is working. So we're working on this one trial. And without going too much into the detail, I'll just tell you it's for pulmonary sarcoidosis. So,
Which is,
which is basically when the lungs develop, for our viewers, when they develop nodules, which then in their lungs, which then causes them the inability to have a fully functioning lung. They get into the oxygen tanks. They have to carry it around, and then
got it.
they're slammed with heavy steroids that can cause them to lose hair, eyesight. So it really causes great damage in one's quality of life and physical appearance. And so I'm extremely excited about it because we have patients flying from different states to come to one of our clinics where we're conducting it. And I'm proud to say, we were the highest enroller nationwide to help so many patients, and the feedback that we received. See, that's what I enjoy the most, because, after doing this so long, you get to put the points on the board, and sometimes the numbers and the points all look the same. But, just the feedback and hearing from people like, hey, I feel so much better. I was trying to find a way to get treated, but my local doctor couldn't help me. This wasn't available, is what brings joy to me. So, so to answer your question, tackling these rare diseases where people don't know where to turn, and then having Amicis and my team, provide them an outlet to get some type of help, is what brings joy and excitement to me and to my staff. Absolutely, we love that.
Very exciting field of activity, of business, very unique. And as I said, we're really pleased for you to join the Santa Cruz Valley business community. So, Tyrone, I want to thank you for joining me today. And for everybody who's listening and watching, thank you for joining us today. And you can subscribe to the podcast, SCV Means Business, wherever you get your podcasts, all of the major platforms. And we will see you next time. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Holly.
Thank you.